We're gonna make the steps now. And I have these large pieces of cherry that I took down a tree at my in-laws farm, and they're warped. I mean, it would be cool for a table, but it's not flat, and it would take quite a bit to do that. However, it's very thick. Okay, we went 7/8 of an inch. Presently, this stuff is 2 inches thick, so I have quite a bit to take off, which means I can get it flat. We're to put the steps on, and the steps are supposed to overhang the fronts here by 1/2 of an inch. So, if we did our stool perfectly, it was supposed to be 6 1/4 there and 1/2 inch, so it should be the width of our treads are 6 3/4. Doesn't always work that way. So I am going to. There's going to be a lot of waste in this process here because I have 2 pieces of cherry that I'm going to take the 2 steps out of because there's cracking and bark and all kinds of stuff that I have to get around. So I'm going to take 2 out of here, and I'm going to use a framing square to help me lay out where they're going to be on here. I'll measure my treads. So I'll bring this up. The depth back here is 6. It's almost 6 1/2. So I want to have like a 7-inch one here, and this one's 6. So I want to have like a 6 1/2. So I'm just going to write that on there because it's very easy to forget that information. 6 1/2. Make sure I measure twice, cut once, and this one is going to be 6 15/16. Okay, so now we're going to be different from one another, almost 1/2 of an inch different from one another, but that's okay. All right, so I want to get a framing square, and I want to lay that out on here and draw this out. Let me give you 1 second to grab that.
Talked about so much about how bands are sort of like a marriage, and you know, things go bad, they go bad, and it's hard to patch them back up, et cetera, et cetera. But I wonder if there's a difference between being on the road and playing older stuff, and then getting together.
So I'm going to lay out with the grain a good bit. There's a crack right here. It goes up. I want to make sure I don't use that and come very close to that even. But I want to go kind of with the grain. So I'm going to go like something like that. Okay. So I'm going to make it bigger than what I need it. So here's I'm going to make it 8 or 7 1/2. I'll flip that over, line that up. Actually, I'll just come down here. Line that up. And then bring it out to, I need 21 inches for this, so I'm going to make this like 23. You always give yourself plenty of extra length. You still want the square on this side, so make sure you guys can see. Line that up with my line there. And this is all very rough, what I'm doing here. So 7 1/2 right there. And then I'll go ahead and I'm making it 24 inches is what it looks like here. 7 1/2 wide, 24 inches long. So I don't know if you can see that or not, what I drew there. So I'll make that more bold. So I'm taking out this. Can you even see that? Yeah, you can. Here. Here. And most people do this with chalk. And there. So that's one of our steps there. I just want to make sure that I do have 7 1/2 everywhere because I want to start off with that at the very least 7 1/2, 7 1/2, and we're 24 long. 24, 24. So how do I cut this thing out? It's like at a weird angle and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to cut it out on a bandsaw because the bandsaw is going to allow me to work with this warped piece of wood, and we're going to get our step out of this. So let's go over to the bandsaw and cut this out. Remember, this is just one of our treads too. Okay. Clear off the bandsaw. wires on here. I just did some rewiring in here for the electricity classes. Okay, so we're looking pretty good. I'm going to get us to a spot where you can see what's going on here. Where can I put you? That's right here. So I'm cutting this out. I want to get rid of some of this waste excess that I don't need to begin with. Gorgeous cherry though. Move my hand up so it's not in the past the blade. So I have a lot of my square already cut out. Back end where that crack was. So one thing, I said I cut this tree down, and one thing different about that means that I air dried this. I didn't put this in a kiln, so this is not going to be like 9% is what a kiln dry would do. This is probably the ballpark of like if I had to guess, I'd probably say 14%. So that means 14% of this weight is moisture that's in the board here. So it's not flat. I have to make it flat on the joiner. My joiner is an 8-inch wide joiner. We have a 10-inch wide one at school. I have an 8-inch wide one here. So I'll make this flat, and I'll get the other one done too. So we'll have two pieces that we're going to work with for these trays. The process is identical for the next one there. So I'm going to go in there. I'm going to just go ahead and cut out the exact same thing out of that next board there. And that's where we get these two pieces from. Oh, by the way, so the reason for using a bandsaw, one was because we were at odd angles for this. But the other thing is, if you have a board that's not sitting flat, if it has some wobble to it, you would never put it on the table saw. Because if it shifts in the middle of a cut, it's very likely to put sideways pressure on the blade, and then it spits back out at you, and we get a lot of kickbacks to that manner. With a bandsaw, we have a big blade that goes around the wheel at the top and the wheel at the bottom. There's a motor at the bottom there. And there's always just downward pressure of the blades. The blade's coming down through, and that's what I'm cutting with. So it's holding it onto my work surface, and it's not making it want to move around a lot. So the bandsaw is a much safer place to make these cuts with a board that's not flat than it would be to have a table saw or otherwise.